Tonight, our Presidential Contenders series focuses on one of the candidates whose views tend to separate him from the rest of the field. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is not your typical Republican, and he's proud of that.
The winner of the CPAC 2015 presidential straw poll is Rand Paul.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul's straw poll win at last weekend's CPAC gathering of conservatives outside Washington was anything but a surprise. It's his third win in a row, a feat his staff jokingly referred to as a triple crown. The question is, can he transition that stand with Rand enthusiasm to a successful presidential campaign? You're formidable in straw polls like here at CPAC. Do you think that the Paul organization already, because of your father's run, is kind of ready to go? I mean, where are you on the broad picture of actually fighting for the nomination?
I think there are some advantages to having a structure out there and people out there who are already sort of committed. I think in order to win a primary, if I get in, it has to be someone who fuses together. So it's a foot in both camps. It's a foot in the libertarian camp, a foot in the conservative camp, and that's where I am. I'm a libertarian conservative.
What do you think the most important thing for this country is in your mind?
The number one threat we have right now is our debt. $18 trillion debt. We borrow $1 million a minute. Now you could say it's ISIS, but you can't fight ISIS if you're bankrupt. We've got to somehow become a solvent nation, which means we can't just keep piling debt after debt after debt.
Paul hit that message, sharply reducing federal spending hard as he campaigned for Senate in Kentucky in 2010 at the height of the Tea Party movement.
We've come to take our government back.
Once in the Senate, he proposed a bill along those lines.
We've introduced a bill, or my office has, that would cut $500 billion in spending.
That bill had zero chance of passing the Senate. Paul says Washington's reaction to that bill is a major problem that frustrates Americans.
Everybody in Washington, oh my goodness, we could never do that. I went home and they said, well, will that balance the budget? What are you going to do to balance the budget? I mean, at home it's like not enough. Up here, people are like, can't do it.
Most analysts will tell you Rand Paul is not a traditional politician.
Rand Paul is a fascinating political figure and still a little mysterious, frankly. Ophthalmologist, medical background. The question is whether the Republican base is comfortable with this guy, whether they feel they can trust him on national security, foreign policy, and cultural issues. And he's going to have to convince people of that.
Paul has proven to be a loud and sometimes divisive voice in the Republican Party on foreign policy. Libertarians often talk about how we need to retreat from the Middle East, to stop provoking our enemies there. Do you agree?
My point of view is that the most important thing we do is national defense, bar none. I think if I'm looking at spending for national defense, it's my priority. It's what I would spend money on over every other consideration in Washington. As far as where we're involved, I think there's a spectrum. The spectrum is from we're never anywhere around the world to we're everywhere all the time. And I'm not for never being anywhere, but I'm not for being everywhere all the time. We do have to defend ourselves, but it doesn't always mean every war is the appropriate war to be in.
Polls shift all the time, but increasingly there are more people saying they would be behind putting some level of ground troops in to fight ISIS.
Right.
What would it take for you to make that decision?
We have to debate, is there an American interest? And my conclusion is, yes, there is an American interest in us defending against ISIS. Number one, the embassy in Baghdad should be protected. The consulate in Erbil should be protected. One of my big criticisms of Hillary Clinton was she didn't defend the consulate in Benghazi. So absolutely we should defend our American interests over there.
Like another potential candidate in the race, Jeb Bush, Rand Paul has a family political history. Texas Congressman Ron Paul tapped into an almost libertarian insurgency, an anti-establishment movement that created an impressive wave in 2008 and 2012.
I will speak until I can no longer speak.
Senator Rand Paul earned his own fame as a senator with a 13-hour filibuster of John Brennan's nomination to lead the CIA over the use of drones. Paul has questioned foreign aid to everywhere, and at times has sounded non-interventionalist. His critics call it isolationist. You are not your dad. as far as foreign policy, as far as a number of issues. But some have said that you are moderating your libertarian views to cater to a presidential run. What do you make about that?
I would say I am who I am. People need to judge me on my record. I've been saying for 4 or 5 years I'm not an isolationist, and then when people figured, they said, oh, he wants to do something against ISIS. And it's like, yeah, I've been telling you this for 5 years. It's not an all or none.
Lightning round here. Abortion. Where are you?
I'm 100% pro-life.
Gay rights.
Well, I'm for traditional marriage. I think marriage is between a man and a woman. Ultimately, we could have fixed this a long time ago if we just allowed contracts between adults. We didn't have to call it marriage, which offends myself and a lot of people. But I think having competing contracts that would give them equivalency before the law would have solved a lot of these problems. And it may be where we're still headed.
Marijuana. Colorado a success? Not a success?
I think still yet to be determined. My main focus on all of the drugs is that the punishment needs to be proportional to the crime. I think that the war on drugs has had a disproportionate impact on African Americans, Hispanics, poor people in general. And what I would like to correct, and I met with the President this week on this, what I would like to correct is to make sure criminal justice is applied equally.
There's confusion about vaccinations with you.
I'm pro-vaccine.
Pro-vaccine.
Yeah, I tried to say that to people, but people listened to only part of what I was saying. And in every interview, I've always said that I was vaccinated, my kids have been vaccinated. But people went a little crazy when I said I believe in freedom also. And the interesting thing is, I'm not proposing any legal change. The legal structure we have now gives in 48 states a religious exemption, 20-some-odd states a philosophic exemption. But if you ask me as a physician, should you vaccinate your kids? Yeah, you should.
Taxes. What would you do as president?
I'd cut them. I think we need to be boldly for what we used to be for. When Reagan ran on tax cuts, and we did significantly cut tax rates, you had millions of jobs created. In fact, I would argue that not only the 80s, but the 90s were the result of Reagan's tax cuts. I think we should do it again. For the overall tax plan, if I choose to get involved nationally, or even if I'm just still in the Senate, is going to be similar to what Steve Forbes presented, a 17% flat personal, 17% flat corporate income tax.
So in order to do that, you're going to have to get the money someplace.
You've got to cut spending. How? I eliminate departments, Department of Commerce, Department of Education, Department of Energy. Almost entirely these departments could be handled either at the local level or not at all.
Paul acknowledges that he faces a potentially crowded GOP field. Your thoughts about Jeb Bush?
I think it will be difficult for a moderate to win the nomination. I was just down in Florida in Jeb Bush's state, and there are people all throughout the crowd with pins, no common core. And this is going to be an overcoming process for him to get to the nomination, and I don't think there's any sort of belief of inevitability or invincibility out there.
What about Governor Scott Walker?
I think he's doing very well. I think people like to see a fighter, and I think that's one reason he's doing well.
Paul and his wife Kelly have been married for more than 20 years. And should he jump in the race, their 3 sons would also be out on the trail. Your family into this run?
Sometimes. Sometimes it's thankless and, as you know, hours and hours of traveling through airports. But I think it's all worth it. I mean, in the end, if I just thought, you know what, I can go back and make a good living as a physician and just, chuck this all and say, it's going to hell in a handbasket, I'll just try to make some money to protect my family from what's going on, I'd feel guilty that I hadn't tried. And I really don't think things are beyond hope. I actually think there is a great deal of hope and optimism of a much better future for all of us.
A decision to run expected soon from Senator Paul.